Welcome to the Vision Maker Media first online Indigenous Film Festival. Vision Maker Media is a Native nonprofit located in Lincoln, Nebraska in the United States. Vision Maker Media empowers and engages Native people to share stories. VMM envisions a world changed and healed by understanding Native stories and the public conversations they generate. Reaching the general public and the global market is the ultimate goal for the dissemination of Native-produced media that shares Native perspectives with the world. VMM continues to showcase the most compelling Native stories for public broadcasting on local PBS stations and online. Today, I will be moderating the Q&A for Rustic Oracle with Sonia Bonspil Boa Lo. Sonia is a bilingual Mohawk filmmaker from the Kanahawaki community near Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Over the last decade, she has developed and produced television projects in English and French, ranging from children's programming to socially driven documentaries to dramatic feature films. She is a recipient of the 2017 Women in the Director's Chair National WIDC Feature Film Award, designed to encourage more feature films directed by women, and the 2016 APTN Award of Distinction. So major film festival sponsors include the Lincoln Journal-Star, Whitman Voice Flutes, Lux Center for the Arts, Native American Calling, National Native News, INDIGEFI, NV1, FNX First Nations Experience, NET Nebraska PBS and NPR stations, Woods Charitable Fund, Humanities Nebraska, the Lincoln Community Foundation, Lincoln Arts Council, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Cooper Foundation, the Rice Foundation, the Cherokee Nation Film Office, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So, welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. I know it's a little late where you're at, so kind of getting past our bedtime, but thank you. So I'm just gonna get first started on the first question. What got you into filmmaking?
Well, like you said, I come from a small Mohawk community, and in 1990, when I was 11, there was a big event called the Oka Crisis, and basically people from my community were defending a piece of land that the municipality right beside where we lived wanted to bulldoze our traditional cemetery and our forest, our pines, to make a golf course. And there was a standoff, and the army came in, and it lasted 78 days, the entire summer. And basically, when I was just a kid, but what I would see with my own eyes during the day when I was there, and then what I would see in the media at night when my parents were like watching the news, were two totally different stories. And I was like, I don't like what I'm seeing. There was a very negative portrayal of Indigenous people and of the Mohawk people. And that stayed with me. And I've always been interested in theater and arts and films. And then when I was getting a little older, when I was like 16, 17, 18, I realized that you can use those art tools, you can use those art forms to actually change the way people perceive you, like with media, basically. So I put my passion for arts mixed with the way the power that I saw in media in terms of how it can kind of decide how people view you. I put those two things together, and I basically said, okay, I want to be a filmmaker, but I want to be a filmmaker to tell our perspective, like our side of the story, basically. And also it was a tool for me to explore my own roots, because I'm from two cultures. My dad is French Canadian, and my mom is Mohawk. And what does that mean today, having those two cultural identities within me? So my first few documentaries were almost like self-serving in a way, because I was exploring those themes, and I was scratching at what it meant to be half Mohawk and half Quebecois in modern times or whatever. So that's how it started, basically.
Cool. Before I forget, people that our audience that is participating, if you have questions, please, you can put them in the question and answer or the chat, and then I'll be monitoring those questions in those chats. So don't don't feel strained that you can't ask questions. So just feel free to ask questions or chats whenever. All right, so what was the first film you made? You kind of talked about it. So exactly what was it about?
Yeah, the first documentary I made was called Last Call Indian. And it's basically because, according to Canadian law, I am the last generation that can, on paper, say
Mhm.
that I'm part of a community or like a tribe, the equivalent of a tribe, but in Canada. And what does that mean? Does that mean I'm not allowed to like learn my language or want my culture to survive? And how do I do that? So that was my first documentary. I Through that documentary, I kind of discovered that my grandfather went to a residential school, an Indian residential school. So I explored all that and what that meant for my family, and I brought my mom along, and so it was more about discovering me. But while making documentaries, I realized that even though I was doing it to discover where I was from, it resonated with a lot of people, regardless of their cultural background. Because I had people, because it played in different festivals and everything, but I had people, from Lebanon emailing me saying, I have a French father and a Lebanese mother, and I understand your struggle. And I kind of realized that you can reach so many people, even if it's not a direct link to your subject. You're connecting on other levels, like just on emotion, basically. And that's kind of what happened with my first feature. I wrote my first feature. It was called Le Dep. It was in French, about 5 years ago. And it takes place in a small community, and it's kind of like a one night, 4 characters in a corner store, very small. And that too, like, I realized at the end of screenings, doing Q&As and stuff, that no matter where I was in the world, people could identify to the characters, and they like related to the themes of like family and struggles and all those like universal themes, basically, and connecting them on those universal themes kind of helped me get the social messages across of what people live in First Nations in Canada, like what we live through. So that's kind of the path. And I worked in TV for a while because you have to pay your mortgage.
Yeah.
so, so TV was like the mortgage paying, and then the films are what I really, really wanted to do.
Your passion. Your
Yeah.
passion.
Yeah.
So, follow-up question. So you had these intersecting identities, and so as you were growing up, were they parallel? Were you getting half and half? How was that with growing up with your two different parents and
Oh
how?
yeah. I really feel like for the longest time I was like, I had these two paths, and if I was with this side of my family, well, I felt like this is where I'm supposed to be, and I'm not supposed to acknowledge this side. And then reverse, I went to school in a French school, and I didn't really talk about my Mohawk side because there was so much prejudice, and it was quite racist, honestly.
Mhm.
So it was just easier to like keep them separate. And it's actually through filmmaking that I allowed myself to be comfortable and accepting that it's okay to be both. You're allowed being both. They are part of you, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're not enough of this or too much of that. You're this. And there's nothing wrong with being this. But I'm 41 years old, and it took me 25 years since I was a teenager to finally accept that, embrace it, and see it as a plus instead of seeing it as a minus.
Yeah, yeah, it's a journey we're on. So who or what were some of your major influences when you first started?
My biggest influence is an amazing lady. If you don't know this lady, then you have to Google her name and check out all her films. Her name is Alanis Obomsawin, and she is the grandmother of Indigenous filmmaking in Canada. She has made, I think it's 55 films in 55 years or something like that. She makes like one movie a year. She's 80 some years old.
Uh-huh.
She like she was the first Indigenous filmmaker to like be on other screens other than screens that are like meant to be for Indigenous filmmakers. You know what I mean? Like we've had like Indigenous film festivals and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but she broke those molds, and she had all these films playing festivals around the world, and she's an activist. She makes films to change society, like to change the way people see Indigenous people, to bring justice to so many social issues and so many injustices. And even for me, like living the Oka crisis, the event that I mentioned in 1990, a few years later, maybe 5 or 6 years later, I saw a documentary that she made about those events. She was in the front lines with the
Mhm.
people in my community. And it was the first time I was seeing those events through our perspective. Like she was showing the world, no, 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 what you guys saw in the media, that's not what happened. This is what happened. This is our perspective. And so like from first time that I saw one of her movies, I was like, this this lady kicks ass. I'm gonna follow in her footsteps. So she was by far the biggest influence in my life.
Cool, cool. All right, so let's switch gears about Rustic Oracle. Um, why did you make this film?
Well, because I wanted to create more awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous women, first and foremost. A huge problem all across North America. But I wanted to mostly create awareness and create empathy for the families that live it. It's not just about statistics and, you know, especially here it's become such a political thing, like the missing and murdered Indigenous women, because we had like a national inquiry, and it was actually like it was a political thing, and even in the campaign a few elections ago, like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, who's going to go ahead with the inquiry, who's not. And I felt like in those years, we lost touch with the human side of it. We lost touch with the fact that we're actually talking about human beings that have gone missing, that have been murdered, and these people have families. They are still suffering. They're still looking for answers, but they also have hope and they have love in their hearts, and they have to put one foot in front of the other every single day and find joy in life. So it was all those things, like just to reconnect on the human side and bring all those awful numbers and statistics back down to one individual, and like the family, one family basically, and have people connect that way. That was basically the basis. And I have kids. So I have kids, and I kept thinking, how would my youngest react if the oldest went missing? And so that was
Mm.
kind of the driving force for when I was writing it.
Okay, so there's a question from Claudia. Um, she says, "Thank you for this film. I'm wondering how you found the actresses. They are phenomenal.
I
Thanks."
agree. Thanks for the question. I don't think the film would be what it is if it wasn't for those amazing ladies. Carmen Moore is a pretty well-renowned actress from out west, from British Columbia. I've known of her work for many years. And when I asked her to audition, a lot of people audition for the role, but when I saw her, I was like, okay, it's her. It's her. And I kind of realized after that that maybe subconsciously I knew it was going to be her. Like while I was writing the role, maybe
Mm.
it was Carmen Moore, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then we held auditions for the role of Ivy, and it's played by Lake DeLille. She's from Ganawage. And the special thing about her was the other kids that auditioned for the role, they all kind of rehearsed the same way. Like even if I gave them pointers during the audition, they would still, you know, because they rehearsed it for so many days with their parents, they were stuck in their ways.
Mm, yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with
Take
that, right?
correction.
Yeah, they're kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Lake was very fluid. Like she would listen to the other actor that was giving the lines, and she would feed off of that and play with that. And that's very, like, that's a natural thing, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
you have it or you don't. And she had it, and she carried the whole film basically. We made lots of room for her, so even like in terms of like our camera equipment, everything was very light and it was always nearby. So if she was doing something that was like spontaneous and not really we weren't even ready to shoot, let's say, but she was doing something that I felt was powerful. We just turn the camera on and follow her, So
Mm-hmm.
I think that helped create a sense of her owning the space and owning the story. But I think the thing that also helped us was the fact that her mom was on set with us all the time. And I could always turn to her mom to make sure, like, she was my guide, to make sure that, first of all, that Lake felt safe, that we were pushing her in the right direction, that she understood what we were doing. And so it was good to have her to like bounce off to make sure that everything was going in the right direction.
So you kind of talked about when you were writing it, you had this certain actress in mind, and then you talked about your kids. My question is, why did you choose the Ivy's point of view? Why did you choose the making of the movie through her point of view?
Yeah. Well, in 2008, there's two girls that went missing from my partner's community. He's from a Anishinaabe community in northern Outaouais, so 2 hours from here. And I went to one of the walks for the family in support of the family, and I noticed that one of the teenager girls that went missing, she had a younger brother and she had like little cousins, and they were, even though like the family was obviously, it's just heartbroken, the kids still found ways to play. They still found ways to make light of their present moment. And I was kind of fascinated by that in a weird way. I kept thinking, like, there's something that's so beautiful in children, that they have this capacity or this mechanism of just, no matter what they're going through, live in the present moment. And it's like almost like a protective bubble, I think, that kids have, and I just wanted to explore that. I at first I didn't even realize that it was going to be Ivy's point of view. I actually thought it would
Mm-hmm.
be the mom's point of view. But then the
Mm-hmm.
more that I was writing, the more that I was like fixated on, well, how would she react and what would she do? And I was picturing my own kids, like, what do they do when we're in a weird situation? Well, most of the time it's not something that I would do naturally. Like, I stay in that negative space. I don't allow myself to go in that positive space. So yeah.
One of the scenes that really got me was when I believe it was after, Ivy thought she saw Heather,
Mm.
and and she walked in, and the mom came in, she was screaming, and she was trying to calm her down, and it's like, yeah, you have a kid, and you're trying to calm her down, but then it was just those emotions, like that she was going through, and so I can see how you said, she took direction when she was, and she was feeling the character, and she was feeding off characters, and characters were feeding off her, and you could see that, and so as she goes through the film.
And that scene, I'm still in awe with that scene, because she cried her eyes out in the first few takes when we were following her. And I felt really bad. I felt really bad because I was making a kid cry, and but her mom was like, no, no, this is part of her process too. She understands the subject. She has an older brother in real life. She gets it. Let her live her emotions, and so having her say that, I was like, okay. And every take, sure enough, even when we were done her side of it, and I'm like, okay, a reverse, we're shooting Carmen,
Uh-huh.
she still gave it her all, and she had like these tears gushing out of her eyes. And so we took time after that to like calm down, and it was so weird because 2 minutes later she wipes her eyes and she's like, did you like it? Was it good? And I was like, I'm sobbing, your mom is sobbing, the camera crew is sobbing, and you're like, I'm done, I'm good. And it's just amazing. She was amazing.
Yeah, well, she was an actress. Claudia said, "Thank you for answering her question." We have another question. It's anonymous. Thank you so much for the film. Can you speak a bit about your research process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I spent months researching, mainly not necessarily for like Ivy's character, because I had stuff in my own life I could get inspired by, my own family and cousins and well, like I said, the girls that went missing in my partner's community.
Mm-hmm.
But I started researching because I didn't want it to fall on one specific story. I wanted it to represent many stories that happen in Canada. So there's like bits and pieces of different actual real cases. And as I was reading all these incredibly hard stories to read, I realized that there was like this sad pattern of human trafficking in Canada, and there was this route that started in Quebec. Well, one of the routes that started in and around Montreal that would go up to like a northern town called Val d'Or, and it would go into Ontario, into Ottawa, and then access through Thunder Bay, the Great Lakes, and then either move out west or move down to the United States. And I had no idea that that existed, and seeing the numbers and the, like reading the stories. So that helped me kind of trace the road trip that the mom and the daughter go on.
Mm-hmm.
And if not, the rest of it basically comes from my community. Like they are in Ganasdage. I'm from Ganasdage. We shot there. So it was just, it was what I knew, basically, you know, it's based on what I knew. When it was set in the mid 90s, I lived there in the mid 90s. So it was just a lot of from my own perspective, I guess, in a way.
Cool. So I have a question. Why did you title it Rustic Oracle?
That's a good question. Well, Rustic Oracle is actually like a literary, like poetic term for dandelions. And at first, like the dandelion was basically just Ivy blowing her childhood memories into the wind and letting like life take care of her memories. But there's also I kind of came to realize that there's a deeper meaning. Like the dandelion is a very powerful flower, you know, it's a flower that the roots are incredibly strong. It'll always grow back stronger. It has medicinal powers. It can cure diseases. It can tell time. It can predict the weather. There's all these like powers for a dandelion, and yet we, as a society, see it as a weed.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's, you know, there's a metaphor there, you know, and for Indigenous women, like we're Indigenous women are so powerful with like knowledge and caring and medicines and ways of seeing life, and yet we're, you know, the portion of the population in Canada that's, you know, statistically is most likely to be victims of violence, victims of heinous crime, of sexual crimes. And so I know it's like a stretch in terms of metaphors, but that came after my whole blowing the childhood memories into the wind metaphor. And there's something with the word oracle as well. Like Ivy has these recurring dreams, but are they really dreams or are they visions? So there's that as well.
So you like came up with something and then it all fit in.
It all fit in.
It all fit
Yeah.
in. All right. So do you write all your films that you direct?
I think I'm more of a writer than a director.
Okay.
Kind of realized that with Rustic, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
because even though I'm happy with the film, I still prefer my script to what I see, because I feel like there's some scenes that I could have illustrated better. It has nothing to do with the actors. The actors are amazing, but my work. And I actually quite enjoy writing. I like the process of writing. It's heavy and it's hard, and I you know, I cry a lot and I have stomach aches and all those things, but I find it very rewarding. And there's something where when I finish the script, I feel like there's this giant weight off my shoulders that I don't necessarily feel when I finish a film. When I finish a film, I almost feel like there's more weight, because now it's like, what are people going to think and how is it going to be? Whereas a script, it's like, okay, I've done this part. Now, you know, someone can take it on and make it into something else. So yeah, I quite enjoy writing.
So do you give off your scripts a lot? Do you mostly like direct your scripts, or do you kind of give them to someone else?
I direct most of them. I've only like given a couple of like TV episodes and one film that I kind of like co-wrote. But I know that in the coming years, well, I'm working on a mini series right now, and I'm going to direct that one. But after that, I might actually move into just writing and leaving the directing for other people. I think maybe.
Maybe.
I say that, but maybe, yeah, I say that. Maybe after the series, I'm gonna be like, I love directing. I no longer want to write. I don't know. We'll see.
So when you write, because I despise writing, so I like acting and directing, but like, so when you write, like, how do you get in your state of mind of writing? Is it just like you just boom, I'm writing for a couple of weeks, or I'm doing a little bit here and there, or how is your process?
I need a hard deadline. I'm a procrastinator. If I don't have a hard deadline, it's just gonna sit there, and then I'm gonna write, and then I'm gonna hit delete. I've done that so many times. Like, you write a few pages and you think it's great, and then the next morning you read them and you're like, delete, 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 delete.
What was I thinking?
What was I thinking? Whereas when I have a hard deadline, I feel like I don't ask myself that many questions. I just, okay, I have to deliver this. And so I write more with like just like an instinct, and I don't question myself as much. And then it ends up being like way better than the one page that I spent for 1 week dwelling over or whatever. But it comes in waves. Like, there are weeks where I want to, like, I don't know, crawl into a fetal position and cry because like nothing's coming out and is just ugh. And then all of a sudden something's unlocked, and then it just all comes pouring out. But I have a really good script consultant that I've been working with for a while, and she said something to me like last year when I was starting the series that I wrote, and she kept saying, your ideas come while you are writing. So even if you feel like you're writing crap at that moment, that crap might lead you to something great that you wouldn't have accessed if you didn't go through that crap. So that was a little bit comforting, because I was like, okay, just keep going, keep pushing. Something will come. But yeah, if there's no hard deadline, then I'll just procrastinate forever, and then I won't get paid, and then I'll sell my house or whatever.
Your mortgage is gone.
Yeah, exactly. Then I'll go back to TV.
So when did you start Rustic Oracle? When did you start writing this?
Actually, the first, not first draft, but the first treatment, I wrote it before my first feature, which I wrote and shot in 2015. But I had never done a feature, and I felt like there's no way I can tackle this subject without ever having done a dramatic feature. I had done 2 feature docs, but so we kind of pushed it aside, and there was this initiative through Telefilm. Telefilm's our public funding in Canada. I go like this because it feels like a wheel, like you need to get in the wheel. And they had this initiative for first-time filmmakers a couple years ago. Like, it was the first time they were doing that. But they weren't giving, it was a very, very small amount of money, but I guess it was a way for people to prove that they could do it. And I was like, okay, well, I know it's expensive, so I'm going to try to minimize locations and actors. So that's kind of how I came up with the concept for my first film, The Depth. So I wrote and directed that one, and I think that gave me the backbone to be like, okay, I can do this. I'm going to go back to my other script that is the one that I really feel I need to scream out, about missing murdered Indigenous women. And then I wrote a couple of drafts and sent it into the funding wheel, and then waited for a year to get the funds.
Okay.
Because it's always a lengthy process to get the funds. But luckily, I think it happened at a time where a lot of the funders felt, I don't want to say an obligation, but they felt like, yes, we need to talk about this. Yes, we need to see this on the screen, and we can't have a white dude come in and tell this story. So we're gonna help. We're gonna support this project. And so there was not just funding support, but there was support. Like, I had a lot of workshopping and things like that of different organizations that wanted to support me and help me push this vision forward. And I was very grateful for that, including the WIDC that you mentioned in the bio, which is the Women in the Director's Chair.
Uh-huh.
They were that organization is really great in supporting female voices and helping us feel confident in our directorial abilities.
All right, so we have a couple questions. Sandy Scott, our first one. As a young native beginner filmmaker, what advice would you give to film and direct a project like Rustic Oracle?
Yeah, I would say it's funny because we had a panel earlier today and there was a similar question. And I think the most important thing is, well, if it's starting with writing a story, I would say write what you know. Start from your own perspective and your own story in a way. Like, don't try to go out and write something that you know nothing about. You won't connect to it, and especially with the first project, you need to connect to the project and love it, because you're going to have to go out and fight for it.
Mm-hmm.
Fight to get producers' attention, and then to get funding attention, and to get people on board. And if you're not sure of what your film is, or what the story is, or how attached to it you are, you won't be able to convince other people, especially if you don't have another film to show. If this is your first film, you just have to really believe in the content. And the other thing is, I would say, find good allies to help you do that. Like, find good allies, people you trust, people who have more experience than you. There's no shame in asking for help, to ask people that have more experience than you for help, because I don't know anyone in the industry that has ever turned down helping someone else. Like, you want to pull people up, not push people down. So a lot of people are so willing to help you stand up. So don't be afraid to ask for help.
Oh, thanks. All right. The next question. I wonder if you could, and this is anonymous, I wonder if you could have any particular audience see this film. Who would it be?
That's actually a really good question too, because for me, even when we were shooting it, the last thing that I want to do is trigger families that have gone through it. So even in terms of like screening it in communities, we make sure that when we go in a First Nations community, that we bring support as well. Like, it's not just a film, but ultimately I do want a non-Indigenous audience to see it and to connect with the characters and the emotions and the family side of it. Like, everyone has a family. So if we can all realize that, that we all have families and we all have loved ones, well, the social issues they're like an undertone that kind of seep through without the audience even knowing it, because they're connecting more on an emotional level. So I think my main audience was non-Indigenous, but I'm hoping that when we travel with the film, we haven't traveled in a while, obviously for obvious reasons, but when we start traveling again with the film, that it can be a healing tool. Because the first screening that we had was in Vancouver, and I didn't expect the reaction that we got at the end. I was happy to get on stage, and I was super excited that people were seeing the film for the first time. But then I got on stage, and then I saw that there was a lot of people crying. And my knees kind of went, oh wow, I'm not in the right mindset right now. And a lot of people started sharing their own stories, and that was heavy. And that's when I realized, okay, this is more than just telling this story. This is something that at the end of the screening, people feel the need to share. And I have to listen. I have to receive that. That's part of my job now. I don't necessarily feel equipped for it, but if I'm putting that film out there, I have to be able to receive that afterwards.
Yeah.
So it's definitely different when I'm viewing it with Indigenous people versus non-Indigenous people.
Oh, okay. And so you said you've traveled a little bit, and so what are some of the reactions with non-Indigenous, like the group of non-Indigenous? What are some of those reactions?
There's still lots of tears. I think people feel they just feel for Ivy and for Susan Carmen. There's a lot of shock. There's a lot of disbelief. There's a lot of people who had no idea. I think the slate at the end catches people off guard a little bit, like, because we do put the numbers there, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so I think during the film, they're just brought on this journey, and they let themselves just be immersed in this specific story. But then when they see the slate and realize that this is way bigger than just this family, and this family is just one out of thousands, I think there's a bit of a punch to the face or to the gut, and the conversations usually in the Q&As and stuff go along those lines, where people are like, I had no idea. So that's always also, I take pride in that as well. Like, I feel like, okay, cool, like one more person who is now more aware of this, and hopefully they will tell someone else, and all this will trigger change, like real change, not just blah blah change.
Just talk, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking as you're talking and playing the movie back in my mind, do you think the reactions would have been less expressive if it was from the mom's point of view?
That's a really good question, and I think so. I think there's something that's maybe that touches us a little bit more, like where I think we're more sensitive when we're talking about children. There's that, and also I feel like if it was the mom's perspective, I kind of would have been forced to go more down in like a suspenseful police drama line, almost, in a way, right? Because
Yeah.
as an adult, she's looking for the answers, so you as an audience, you're actually listening to those exchanges. So it's more about where Heather is and finding her, as opposed to what Ivy is living through. So I think, yeah, there would probably be a degree of separation a little bit more as an audience if it was through Susan's eyes.
Yeah, especially with the plant, the scene with the plant. It was like, it's just a simple plant. She's like, I'll get you another plant. It wasn't about the plant. It was something that she kept, and it was hers, and it was given to her, and so yeah, there were some powerful moments. All right, so we have some more questions. I want to make sure I get the audience questions. Anonymous, do you have other films or documentaries that you recommended on the topic of MMIW, missing?
Yes, there's one incredibly powerful one that was done maybe 2-3 years ago. That's called, oh, I just know the French title, but maybe I can Google it real quick. It's called Ce silence qui tue, but it is.
For our French speakers that are paying attention.
Yeah, Ce silence qui tue. Oh, Quiet Killing. A Quiet Killing.
Okay.
It's made by Kim Obamsawin, who is from Quebec, but a lot of the people in her documentary are from out west, Vancouver. So it's a very bilingual film. She goes from French to English. It is very powerful because she's giving a voice to not only women who have experienced violence, or families that have lost a loved one, but also men who have been the violent one, basically, and why. And so there's this very interesting space for men as well, and it's heartbreaking, it's maddening, it's touching, and you even laugh in some places, because there's like this weird sense of humor sometimes in Indigenous communities. Very powerful film. And there's also a film from the NFB, the National Film Board here in Canada, called Finding Dawn, that was done quite a few years ago, and it's about finding one specific girl that goes missing, but through the journey of finding her, there's all the other elements that come to light about how big this epidemic is. So those, I would recommend those two for sure.
Let me see what this other question is before I answer. Okay, I'm gonna ask my question. So you talked about the funding. I'm going a little bit back on your conversation, but listen to anything. You talked about it, the reason you got it, you thought it was at the right time. People said they wanted to support it. So has there been any traction in Canada, Quebec, and the community since, since the talking or whatever the election cycle? Has there been any good traction to start, you know, tapping down and finding these and shutting these off, these roots and these things? Is it?
Um, Sadly, I don't think that the numbers of missing and murdered Indigenous women, the numbers aren't going down. So I don't think the it's really sad to say, but the film's not big enough to create real immediate change. I'm hoping that eventually this film, but also other films and other activists and all kinds of art forms, putting those all together will I hope help change the narrative, because we'll be also showing women in a different light in media, and that for me was super important too, to have like strong Indigenous women on screen. I
Mm-hmm.
think that helps change the way that we view Indigenous women, and that has an impact on violence in a way, right? Because we're seen as strong as opposed to being seen as weak, which and often that was the case. If you if you I did a little bit of a study on this because I worked on a documentary series about reappropriating Indigenous beauty. And one of the themes was our representation in the media. And um, in the past, like 100 years of filmmaking, well, first of all, 99% of Indigenous stories are told by non-Indigenous people, up until very recently. And there's only three kinds of women characters in these films. There's the one that falls in love with the white guy, so she has to like betray her family and basically become the white person. There's the crazy old lady that's like a shaman or a witch or whatever, and she has weird eyes and potions and basically a witch.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the slutty squaw who just like sleeps with everyone, and she's also mean. And what they all have in common is they all die. So to me that was like, we need to change that. So I think by changing the way we view Indigenous women on screen and in media, that will help change the general perception. Um, so hopefully, eventually, it will change. What I have seen in the immediate, though, is because the film has been playing in theaters here for 3 weeks now.
Okay.
Not that many people go see films right now,
Yeah,
obviously,
unfortunately, yeah.
fortunately, but there's some people. I see talk on social media about more awareness and more people upset and frustrated and sick of this actually still being a thing. So hopefully by getting more and more people just mad at the situation, well, they might hopefully um, apply that in the way that they vote for political parties, but also locally, their engagement in their own communities and their
Mm-hmm.
interaction with Indigenous women in general. So that's what we're
Yeah.
hoping for.
Yeah, that's what we all hope for.
Yeah.
All right, so the next question is from Kelly, from Lincoln, Nebraska. Sonia, directing is a hard job, lots to think about. What are a couple things that you really love about directing and a couple things that you don't care for when you're the director? Thank you, Kelly.
Great question. I love it. The thing that I love the most is well, there's two things. There's the sense of community that exists on a set. Like, I actually really love that. I love having lots of people working together for the same goal. There's something that's so uplifting and powerful about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I love when actors say the lines in a way that I didn't imagine, but it's even better when they say it. When they breathe something in that's like just, oh, that's how it's meant to be said. That's not even how I wrote it. Like, I love those moments, and it's just really, really powerful. So seeing your words come to life on screen is amazing. The thing that I hate the most as a director is yelling or having to. I hate it. I hate it. That's why, like, the key is to have like the loudest assistant director, so like he or she does all the yelling and you don't have to. I don't like the idea of like authority. I don't, and I don't even like when that's associated with being a director. That's not what being a director is. Being a director is creating a vision and convincing people in all the departments to believe in your vision and to bring that forward. It doesn't have to be like a hierarchy and I hate that.
Authoritarian.
Authoritarian, yeah, no. So I don't like that aspect of it. I know sometimes it's necessary, like you kind of have to put your foot down to get, the ball rolling and to finish your day on time and all that stuff. But I hate that. I hate that. Look.
All right, so Claudia has a real quick question I think you can answer, and then I'll get to the other question. She says she teaches a college cinema class. How would I go about screening your film for my students? Is that possible?
Definitely. I'll send you an email, or you send me. Can we get in touch with people? Can I write?
We'll have to ask Elena that one.
Okay.
Um,
But if not, if you go to our website, either Rustic Oracle's website or Niche Media, which is the production company, or Seventh Screen, which is the distributor, you can get in touch and we can set up a screening for sure. Oh, here, I can put my email here.
yes, put your email here. Yeah. Oh, and then she gave her email, so.
Okay, cool. All right, we'll make it happen.
Oh, everyone's giving their email. Great.
No spam, people. No spam.
Yeah, no spam. All right, so next question we have from Aurora. My daughter took me to Wind River, USA, which involves rape deaths in Wyoming and it's getting late for me. Sorry. Implicating North Dakota oil men and tracing the traffic routes. Hold on, a chat's right in front of me. Hold on. And tracing the traffic routes. Did you see food to U.S. to North Dakota areas of men raping the earth? Sorry, did you need me to repeat that?
I'm just not sure what the question was. Do I equate it to men raping the earth? Is that the question?
Maybe. Okay, so let me read it again because I got interrupted with this thing. My daughter took me to Wind River, USA, which involves rape deaths in Wyoming, implicating North Dakota oil men and tracing the traffic routes. Do you see food to U.S. or food to us maybe, but I think it's U.S. us to North Dakota areas of men raping the earth? Is that a film?
Wind River is a film, so I think that's what the film that she's referring to. And yes, there are men in around the town that are drilling, and they are the ones that are responsible for the death of an Indigenous woman in the community.
Okay.
It's a very dark film. It's a good film because it does talk about a really sad reality. Because what happens often in remote communities, especially if there are minors and development in those communities, there's a sense of they can get away with stuff because it's so remote and no one's gonna come up and investigate. Mm-hmm. So that does definitely happen. So in that sense, I think the film did expose a truth that is sad and that needed to be exposed. The only thing that I didn't like about that film is the perspective is still the perspective of a white guy, because the main character is, I forget the actor's name, but anyways, he plays a cop that's like investigating this, and the family and even this woman, they become kind of like not that important. They become second to what he's trying to achieve. So that was the only downside to that film. Still a good film though, still worth watching.
Aurora, she said there was a misprint. She said the route, where did the traffic go? Food was a misprint. So, and I believe she has her email in here, so I guess I will put that in the chat because I think she would want to get some stuff. Cool. All right. It's kind of hard to someone can't ask it and I'm trying to read it, and so. All right, so please, we got about 12 more minutes, and so ask questions if you have more questions, but I have a couple more questions. And I think you've answered them, I know what I want to ask you. Are you working on any new projects? You kind of talked about a mini series. What's that project about?
Yeah, I just spent the last 18 months writing a limited series on residential schools, Indian residential schools. My grandfather went to residential school, like I said, and a couple years ago, I was listening to the French radio here, and I actually heard a scholar, a man that is usually there because he's a smart guy, say that residential schools didn't really exist in Quebec, that it was more a English Canadian colonial tool.
Yeah.
And I got really upset about that because I know a lot of families that are still suffering from the effects of residential school. So I decided to write a French series because I am bilingual. So depending on the project, I'll write in French or in English. And I felt like this needed to be told in Quebec, in French Quebec, so that we understand that this did indeed happen here. It's not just in English Canada.
Yeah.
So I basically I kind of used my grandfather and his sisters, like their story, but they went to Ontario when they went to residential school, so they went on the English side, but I took their story and then I put it in a Quebec French Canadian residential school. So we're going into production in February, and it was really hard to write. Honestly, it's the hardest thing I've ever done, other than giving birth. It felt like giving birth. It was so painful. But I feel like it was something that I needed to do. And now that it's done, obviously directing it is going to be a long process. It's going to take like a year, and it's going to be hard as well. But after that, I really want to write a comedy. Like, this is heavy. This is heavy stuff.
Have you written comedies before?
No, so I'm gonna need help. No, but I like to think that I'm like a funny person. I don't know, or just something light, maybe like a nice, love story, or just something that is not as heavy and not as like I feel like I've aged so much in the last few years with these stories. Like I feel like my face is like, and my stomach is like. So I kind of want to work on something that's light and fluffy and fun, like a kid's show maybe, or something like that.
Well, in your bio, it talked about kids show. What kind of kids shows were they, like educational kids shows or?
Yeah, I did a bit of those. I loved working on kids shows. It was so fun because it's actually the best school. Even though I went to film school, I feel like my best education was with children's TV shows, because you can kind of get away with making mistakes. You can kind of get away with like directing actors in a, because it wasn't like a cartoon or anything. I actually had like live actors, a giant raccoon, if you believe it or not, like with makeup and the fur and all that. So you like, it helped me find the right words to get the right things out of the actors, the right emotions and everything. But I could, if it wasn't perfect, it was kind of okay to be like overacted, or because it was a kids show, so you can get away with a lot. So I feel like it was a great tool to learn how to direct actors. And also, like, you can't be in a bad mood when you're directing a kids show. You just can't, like, it doesn't make sense, right? So it was fun to be on a set where I felt like we constantly like had to smile. It was very positive. So yeah, I quite like that. So maybe going back to that would be appreciated for a few years.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm jumping back and forth, but I just wanted to catch that moment we were there. But so going back to your grandfather, is your grandfather still alive?
Sadly, no, he passed away when I was writing the first documentary that I did. He passed away during that process, which shifted everything as well. I was like, and it left this like giant hole, because to me, even my Mohawk identity, my link was my grandfather. Like, he was my root. He was the backbone. He was like, if I had a question, or like, I felt like everything came from him. And then when he passed away, I was like, I didn't take the time to ask the right questions. I didn't take the time to sit with him and to just like suck in all his knowledge and his wisdom. And so, yeah, but I carry him with me all the time. And he's still like a huge influence. I still hear his voice. I still feel him in everything I do. And even my family says it all the time. Like when I finish a project, they're always like, your Bubba was here. he was pushing you. He wants you to do this, so he's always present.
Yeah, it's always that 2020 hindsight, you know. That's how my grandmother was on my dad's mom. It was like, you know, we were best buds. I was like the only one that really listened to her, and I was like, but I didn't ask the right questions. You know, I didn't like. I took it for advantage when you were young. You know, you took it for advantage, and then, you know, as I got older, and I always called her, like, you know, once a month, and she'd be like, she was like, don't, let's get off the phone. I'm like, it's a cell phone. We're in cell phones, grandma. It doesn't matter. There's no minutes. You know, we can talk as long as you want. Just tell me your information so I can soak it in. But
Yeah.
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 So
And then once they're gone, you're like, man. Oh, so people soak up your grandparents. It's so important.
yes, soak them up.
Yeah.
Get that information. All right. So we have one more question. All right. So so Kelsey wants to know, was Ivy watching the kids show in her hotel room?
Yes.
It was the person in the raccoon costume.
Bingo. That's exactly. Okay, so funny story about that. In my script, it was like, I think she was watching like Degrassi, and then she was watching like Little House on the Prairie or Road to Avonlea, one of like the big shows that I watched when I was a kid. And then we tried to get the rights for all these shows, and it was ridiculously expensive and super hard to get the rights. And then I was like, oh, screw it. Let's just put Mookie. And that's the name of the show that I directed. And I was like, it can be anything basically, because she's just watching TV and it's annoying and Susan wants her to turn it off. And so, yes, that is, I forgot that it was there. That's hilarious.
Good catch, Kelsey. Good catch.
Good catch, definitely.
Claudia says it's a great moment.
It is actually, it's a cool moment, because that's actually one of the moments where we like kind of quietly picked up the camera and started shooting without anyone being really ready. And even Carmen knew that we would do that too, so she like would go sit down, and because Lake was just kind of like bouncing on the bed waiting for us to be ready, and we captured that, and it worked. We just let it flow after that.
Oh, okay, so that wasn't in the script. That was just her being her at that time.
Well, this scene was supposed to be in the script, but in the scene she was just sitting on the bed watching TV, and then Susan gets annoyed by the sound of the TV. But the playfulness of her like bouncing and then jumping from one bed to the other to answer the phone, that's all her.
She's gonna be good. All right, so we have a couple minutes left to end it. So is there any closing remarks that you would like to, any questions, anything you want to share with us?
No, I've been talking a lot, I think. If anyone has a last question, yeah.
Yeah, let's see if anyone has a last minute question.
I just want to say, like, thanks for watching the film. Thank you, Wendy, for a great conversation. I feel like I could chat with you for another hour. and thank you, Vision Maker, for allowing this cool Q&A. And it would have been nicer to have, you know, an in-person conversation, but this is the next best thing, so it's okay.
Yeah, next best thing. No, I enjoyed the film. I like films for characters. I mean, my background is, you know, theater arts, and so and I like, you know, character development, and I like to see how characters like start from the beginning to the end, you know. And it's like, and so, but the way Lake, you know, played Ivy, you know, it was just like, it's a little bit of her, and then a little bit of like you're directing her, and then and all that going together. So it was like, you know, it was like those arcs. You can see the arcs in that, and just being a kid, because it's a very heavy subject, but a kid's a kid.
Exactly.
They go in and out of that heaviness.
Exactly. It's a coping mechanism.
Yeah. They don't sit with it like we do. We like, as adults, we just sit with it, and that was Carmen. She just sat with it. She was always sitting with it, and so, you know. But yeah, so no, this was a great conversation. Thank you all for the questions. Yes, thank you, Claudia. It was. I hope, you know, I kept it going and moving, and so, you know, and thank you, Visions Maker Media, and hopefully we can get your movie out after this COVID so more people can see it, and
Yes.
we can get some traction on this, and get this awareness, and make some changes in the world. So
Yes.
I'm so
Yes.
tired of this world being the way it is.
Me too. It has to change. It's going to change. We
Yeah.
all here are going to make it change. There you go.
Yes. Yes.
All right.
Leave the world better than we found it. That's what I have tattooed on my body, and that's what I try to do. So,
Awesome.
yeah. So thank you so much. A couple of questions. I actually really appreciate that this was virtual, or else I wouldn't have been able to participate. So thanks. Okay. So
there you go. All right.
playing to everyone's needs. Well, good night. I don't
Thanks, everyone. All right. Take care. It was nice virtually meeting you, Wendy.
Yes. Nice virtually meeting you too.
All right. Okay, guys. Bye.